this is in Taiwan. It's November 17th, 2021. And I have today an interview with Dr. Stanley Krippner, Montague Ullman's co-author, an expert on shamanism and also an expert on dreams and other things. And Stanley, it's nice to see you again after so long.
Oh, thank you so much. Last saw each other in New York City.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. I just wanted to ask you a few questions. I jotted a few questions for you to make this interview easier.
Fine.
And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how you became acquainted with Montague Ullman and a few words about him and what you found that was special about him as a person, and anything you would like to say about that time. I think that's a very interesting time in history when he developed this dream group process, and you did that research together with him. Anything at all, as long as you want to talk about it.
Of course, I'll be happy to, because Monty Ullman was a very important part of my life, and I always enjoy talking about him, absolutely. We met at a Parapsychological Association meeting at least half a century ago, and at that time, neither one of us had any idea that we would eventually be working together, because I was very happy in my position at Kent State University, and he was pulling together the Maimonides Mental Health Center, which was located in Brooklyn, New York, but we kept in contact with each other. And then what happened is that he received a surprise grant to do research in dreams and extrasensory perception. He was the logical person to get this grant because for years he had been observing clients of his who would come up with specific information about his personal life. And so he knew that they were picking this up by some sort of ESP, probably telepathy. And so he was very eager to check out these experiences in a laboratory setting. And he used the money to install a soundproof room and an electroencephalograph machine in the basement of the Community Mental Health Center. And he actually interviewed a number of people who he thought would be excellent choices to run the laboratory. And I did too, much better choices than me in terms of experience and expertise. But they all turned him down because he only had a guarantee of funding for 2 years. And that was not long enough for them to make a commitment and to take them away from their current line of work. However, I'm well known for taking chances. Sometimes they work out, sometimes they're disasters. And so I prepared to make the transition from a very secure university position where I could have had tenure within a year or so and pull up stakes and move from Ohio to New York City to start an adventure that the outcome of which was really unpredictable and unforeseeable. So once I joined him in New York City, he had already begun a number of projects. For example, he did a pilot study with Eileen Garrett, the distinguished medium, who both of us had known for many, many years. And she attempted to dream about a picture that he had randomly selected, a picture of the movie Ben-Hur with Charlton Heston. And Eileen came up with a dream in which she was watching the previous Ben-Hur made decades earlier. And then she ended up by saying, well, they've remade Ben-Hur, and I'm really eager to see the updated version. Well, you cannot get any more specific than that in terms of the picture that he had been concentrating on. So that got things off to a good start. And then by the time that I reached Brooklyn, there were about a dozen volunteers lined up who were eager to come to the laboratory and attempt to dream about a picture that was, again, randomly chosen from a large number of pictures. So once I got to New York City, Monty put me in charge of the experimental design. And what I did was to be sure that there was no chance of sensory leakage or inadvertent cueing. For example, his work with Eileen Garrett was impressive, but he knew the picture and he was already monitoring her EEG. So somebody could claim that he was unconsciously reinforcing topics that she was talking about that corresponded to the picture that he was looking at. And immediately I made sure that the person who selected the target picture was not present during the night of the study, and that the target picture would be an emotionally involved art print, and it would be selected from up to a dozen different art prints, all in sealed envelopes, double sealed, double envelopes, so that there can be no chance of peeking through, holding the envelope up to the light and peeking through. And then we had to do another thing. The person who was in charge of the EEG, as I said before, had no idea what the picture was. That was all arranged by somebody else. The person who was in charge of monitoring the EEG and interviewing the participant was just doing something that was in the experimental design with no clues as to what the actual picture might be. So, as you can see, to make sure that everything was well designed, one person selected the pictures and put them in the sealed envelopes. One person, the night of the study, selected the picture that would be used and gave the sealed envelope to the telepathic transmitter, who then went off to a distant room. And then another person would actually run the EEG and interview the sleeping subject. Originally, and again, this is too much detail, I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's interesting.
Originally, the person who was in charge of the EEG randomly selected the picture, which was fine, but as a double precaution, I brought in a third person to judge the ESP so that there could be absolutely no chance that that the sleeping subject would pick up any clues consciously or unconsciously during the course of the night. So we got off to a good start with, as I say, several different volunteers. And among those volunteers was a psychoanalyst by the name of William Irwin, and his dreams for the night so closely corresponded to the picture that Monty and I decided to bring him in for an 8-night study. And the 8-night study produced results that were statistically significant. And so then we immediately scheduled another 8-night study with Dr. Irwin. And then the rest, as we say, is history. We went on for 10 years, and at the end of 10 years, the project moved to the research triangle in New Jersey under the directorship of Charles Honorton, because Monty, at that point, wanted to devote more of his time to his dream education programs. He had made great progress in Sweden and had been invited back. And this is something that he actually did for the rest of his life, with great results, as you yourself know from what you did in Taiwan. And so we kept in touch, and we worked together on many different projects, such as the Dream Telepathy book that you mentioned. And we also did a number of programs together at conferences and symposia. And we just kept on with a very, very rich and fruitful relationship right up to the time of his death. The last time I saw him, he came to my 70th birthday party, which was in New York City, and that was some 20 years ago. And he had been in poor health, but he insisted that he make that birthday party. And I'm so glad that he did, because it was the last chance we had to see each other face to face. So that's a brief synopsis.
What happened when you were in California? And I would go to Monty would invite me up to his Dream Group Leadership Training weekends at Ardsley, New York. And always there was one or two, usually women, one or two women or people from the university where you were at in Saybrook, right? Saybrook University?
Yeah.
And there were one or two students from there, graduate students. And always they said that they came because of you. You recommended that they come. And I remember one of them talking about you and talking about she said for her, the most exciting program that she was involved in at Saybrook University wasn't any of the classes or projects. It was in the morning, early in the morning, you were down in the cafeteria, and anyone who cared to come down could gather around you. And there was a big gathering, from what she said. And one by one, they'd tell a dream, and you would help them figure that dream out. Do you remember that, or want to say?
Oh, yes, that was a very, very popular pastime at the morning breakfasts. The people who wanted to work on dreams would go to a private room, and I would use Monty's dream appreciation technique. And once I taught it to people, they were eager to try it out themselves with their groups or with their families or their clients. And so I really got a lot of publicity for Monty's approach. And I also did it overseas. I introduced many people to Monty's method. I was in Germany, Brazil, England, the Netherlands. And so I've introduced his approach to literally hundreds, if not a couple of thousand people. And then they went on to introduce it to numerous others. And so, of course, now it has taken on a life of its own. And once a month, I work with a group of dreamers in Berkeley, California. And we get started at 7:15 in the evening and keep on going till 9:30 in the evening. And within that space of time, we were able to go through Monty's process for at least 2 people, sometimes 3 people. And we don't try to cut things short. People take as much time as they want to disclose the dream and to go through the various steps of the dream. So I still keep doing that at least once a month. And during the shutdown and the COVID pandemic, I actually did some work with small groups from my computer. So Monty's legacy certainly is a part of my life, and it carries on. Now I should get back to the dream telepathy experiments, because 2 years ago, a group of researchers tracked down all of the experimental nights in our laboratory and the laboratory of other people around the world, and found exactly 50 experimental nights, either full range studies or pilot studies. And in terms of looking at those 50 experiments, the researchers, a team headed mainly by some UK psychologists and parapsychologists, and they found out that the effect that Monty and I pioneered was actually repeatable, and repeatable at very, very high levels. It's the folklore of critics that you can't repeat the dream ESP experiments. And I don't know where they get that idea, because the analysis that was done of the 50 experiments showed that it was repeated at a rate very similar to other psychological studies of similar work. I think one of the most interesting parts of this analysis was when they assigned nights to a scale of rigor. Some of the experiments that we had done nearly 50 years ago passed the test for rigorous controls, and some of the studies that I had personally designed got the highest score of all, a score of 5 on a 1 to 5 continuum. So that made me feel very happy that even some 50 years ago, I was still up to making a design that has withstood the test of time. Now, there are other studies that have been done mainly in the UK, and those produced significant results, not quite as high as the Maimonides work, but still in the same ballpark. There's no statistically significant difference between those studies and the Maimonides studies. The Maimonides studies were a little bit better than the other laboratories, but not at the statistically significant level. That article appears in the International Journal of Dream Research, and I send it out regularly to people who keep asking me, well, I heard that your work has never been repeated. And I say, well, you've been reading too much Wikipedia. The Wikipedia entry says it's not repeated, and they just choose not to look at the evidence. And and my friends keep trying to change the Wikipedia entrance. And after one day, it's taken down and the old accusations keep popping up. So all these people who depend upon Wikipedia for their information get bad information about our work. If I had the money, I would sue them, which I don't have, but it's very, very typical of Wikipedia to downplay and pull the rug out of anything that's favorable to parapsychology. Wikipedia has two targets. One is parapsychology, one is alternative healing. You cannot find anything in Wikipedia that presents either of those two topics in a favorable light. That's the story for that.
Well, you know, people think the scientists are so rigorous about truth, but in fact, scientists can be just as prejudiced as anyone else. And the example that comes to mind is this researcher that obtained evidence that ulcers are caused by bacteria, not by nervousness, etc. And nobody would publish his paper. They all looked, they all just brushed it aside. It turned out it was true. After a long time, it turned out it was true. The scientists, they're like that against a lot of things. Even Stanley, against dreams, a lot of people consider what we do with the Ullman Dream Group to be voodoo, and they just don't want anything to do with it. And it's mind-boggling. I just gave up trying to convince people who don't want to be convinced.
Oh, you're right on both charges. Constantly, I have to correct people who claim that ulcers are a result of nervousness.
Right.
And it's not the case. It's the result of a bacterial infection.
They don't go away.
If somebody is under stress, of course, this doesn't help the condition, but that in and of itself is not the main trigger of ulcers.
But one thing I wanted to ask about this meeting with the students at the university is that, I wanted to ask, the next question I wanted to ask you, you came to New York and you led us in an Ullman Dream Group community practice one year, a few years back before the COVID came in. Yeah. And it was very interesting. Everybody was very interested to see your work because you displayed this rather incredible ability to make sense of a dream, and you did it quick and you did it spot on. Now I wonder if you want to say where you how you developed that. Did you always have this, or did this come gradually, or do you want to say anything about that ability of yours?
You're very, very kind. But the way that I look at it is that once you start to work with people's dreams, you begin to notice themes that keep coming up time and time again. And you keep coming up with dreams with different details, of course, that keep coming up time and time again. And although there is no one interpretation for those dreams that is satisfying to everybody, at least we know that there are maybe a handful of interpretations that dream might fit into. And so I think that the best answer that I can give your question is a lot of it depends upon intuition. I hear the dream and I think to myself, well, that dream seems to be about such and such a topic, seems to be about family discord, seems to be about shyness, seems to be about problems in school. I mean, these are, at least in the United States, common topics. Now you go outside of the United States, and then you have something different happening, because dreams have different meanings in different parts of the world. Now, there are a few what we call universal dream themes, and Patricia Garfield isolated them and wrote a book about them, which I think is undeservedly neglected. And by knowing these common themes, one is able to come up very quickly with a possible answer. And also remember that when I do these interpretations, I'm not saying to the dreamer, this is what your dream meant. I'm saying, if this were my dream, this is what it would mean to me. Then that's enough to get off to a good start.
Well, I here in Taiwan now with people's dreams, I've been doing it at the university and also in the community. And it's gotten to the point where when someone tells a dream, I legitimately have no idea what that dream is about. It used to be people would call me up on the phone and tell me their dreams, and I didn't even ask about context. I would just tell them what the dream meant. And they, oh, wow, how do you, and they were so amazed. But then I met Montague Ullman and worked with him and realized how important context is. And now I've been in dream groups all these years, leading dream groups, and someone tells a dream, I'm stumped like the dreamer. Usually the dreamers don't know what their dreams mean either. It's such a different language metaphor. And I find that what you said, you mentioned intuition. I find this is so important. I find that we have people in our dream groups who apparently don't have much intuition, because when they ask the dreamer for particulars about the dream, they go into minute detail about this little point and that little point, taking up so much time. But if you look at the dream as a whole, the whole dream speaks to us unconsciously, and our intuition somehow understands what we don't know. We can't verbalize it, but grasp. And I felt you got that working with the dream I saw you work with in New York. You got a grasp of what it was about that really fit the dreamer's life and what it turned out to be about. And that intuition, I think, is so important. You also work with shamanism. I would guess intuition, that's a function that we've like neglected in our society. We almost sometimes consider it's not real. I don't know. Do you want to say anything about intuition?
Oh, good heavens, you're very flattering to me and my ability. Again, part of it is sheer intuition. Part of it is the accumulation of working with similar dreams over the years. And when I hear somebody's dream, I don't really take a cookie cutter approach. One size does not fit all. I just listen to the dream, and then I take it into myself and think, all right, now if this were my dream, this is what it would mean in terms of what I've been experiencing recently. Sometimes what I've been experiencing just within the past week or the past month. And then I come up with my report. Now, needless to say, it doesn't always work that way. But if it doesn't work that way, at least I have benefited from accepting the dream as if it were my dream, and I have a better handle on some of my own issues, some of my own problems. So this method that Monty developed is a win-win situation. It's a win for the dreamer, a win for the group, a win for the person who responds.
Well, it's, you just answered a big question in my mind of late, because I was thinking, try how to explain to someone how you can take the whole great dream at a grasp. Do you know what I mean? And get a grasp of the whole. And you just explained it. And I realized that's exactly what I do.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
What I do is I take it in me and this dream in me, and I get a feeling, an intuition of what part of my life this touches, what issue or whatever, what story in me this brings out. And so I'm able to intuit the kinds of questions to ask the dreamer. Now, it may not be true. You know what I mean? Other people are not like me. But in a sense, we're all humans, and we all have similar histories. We all have these similar feelings and issues. And I think we're much better at this than we think. I think people can take dreams, someone else's dream, into them and begin to have intuitions. And I think Monte's process, like you said, releases that and engages that capability and enables it to develop, I think.
You're so right. And now I have to backtrack just a little bit, because some of your listeners, some of your viewers will not know what we're talking about when I use the term dream telepathy. I have to give a specific example. When Dr. Irwin came into the laboratory for the first time, the picture that was randomly selected was called the Zapatistas by the Mexican artist Siqueiros. And it shows soldiers who were part of the Mexican Revolution marching off to battle with the rifles over their shoulders. Now, you see, this satisfies several criteria. It's a fairly simple painting. It's a very emotional painting because there's threats of violence implied, and it's very colorful. The colors are very, very vivid. So Dr. Irwin had one dream about an army marching, which was spot on. This was an army marching, an underground army, but nevertheless, an army marching nonetheless. But then he also had a dream about Mexican women. And this is very close because there were women marching along with the men. So in those two dreams, he really focused on two of the important elements of that picture. Now, when he came back for our 8-night study, he was able to do this every night of the 8-night study. Some were more successful than others, but he also got statistically significant results. And by significant results, we mean that the outside judges were able to match the correct night of dreams with the correct picture more often than you expect by chance. And I left out the important role of the outside judges. Good thing we're going back over this. Once all of the dreams have been typed up, copies of the dreams are sent to 3 different judges, all experts on dreams, and then they try to match the night of the dream with the correct picture. And if chance alone were operating, there'd be one correct match out of 8. In our studies, we got like 7 nights out of 8, or in some cases, 6 nights out of 8. And this is way above the laws of chance. Okay, so now that fills in some of the gaps that I should have filled in earlier, but I think your listeners and your viewers are now much more aware of what these experiments had to do.
Right at the moment, I'm interested in Ian McGilchrist. Have you heard of his work between with the left brain and the right brain?
Have I heard of you? Whose work?
Ian McGilchrist. He has a book called The Master and His Emissary about the left brain and the right brain.
I'm still not getting the name of the author.
Oh, McGilchrist. It's McGilchrist. McGilchrist. So
yes. Okay, I haven't seen that book for a long time. Now I know what you're talking about.
You're right. It is. It's gone back some years now. It's been put out quite a while ago.
Right,
But
right.
the interesting thing is when I read that book, because I've been working in dream groups for so long, again and again, everything he said about, now of course the left brain and the right brain, they both do everything. They're involved in everything we do. But the left brain has a certain proclivity and the right brain has a different proclivity. And they're sort of going in 2 different directions. And I found often the dreamer that we face in a dream group awake, that dreamer has a certain proclivity, but that dreamer's dream in some sense has a different proclivity, and it's delivering new information to the dreamer that the dreamer's set ideas don't contain that information. And so it struck me when I read that book and saw his YouTube presentations that everything he said about the left brain was true for the dreamer we face when we're awake, or even myself. I have a dream, I don't understand it. But the right brain, what he said about the right brain faced what the dream understood, what the dream told me, the dream that changed my life, what it told me. It's like a right brain. And it struck me that all this, the different ideas about telepathy might be more of a right brain thing. And like dreams are a right brain thing. Intuition, I think McGilchrist says it's more of a right brain proclivity. Have you ever found this in your work with dreams, that the dreamer is like the left brain has a set of ideas in a closed box and thinks about categories, whereas the dream itself doesn't have a closed box. It connects with the environment, with other people. It seems to know things that it has no way of knowing. Does that make sense to you?
No, it makes sense to me. Since that book came out, there have been some newer studies. And one thing that they're finding out, it's not as simple as left brain, right brain. That's an oversimplification. Yes, it's true that for right-handed people, not for left-handed people, for right-handed people, it's the left hemisphere that deals with more verbal and more linear modes of thinking. And the right hemisphere people are more involved in nonlinear thinking, pictures, nonverbal material, even emotions. Now, a number of caveats, a number of warnings. When it comes to left-handed people, the situation might be reversed. Not always, but the situation might be reversed in terms of what hemisphere is dominant. Also, when it comes to people who speak Chinese and Japanese, it's completely up for grabs because their sounds are very often based on natural sounds. Water, birds, animals' vocalizations, the sounds of water, the sounds of wind. So people who speak Japanese and to another extent Chinese have a very, very different brain configuration. More work needs to be done on this topic, but I think I've pointed out sort of the challenge that's involved. When we talk about right and left hemisphere, we're talking about people who speak English or a similar language. We're not talking about people that might speak a different language where the sounds are not so neatly categorized as they are in English and other European dialects. So the situation gets complicated the more and more you look into this. Also, I should add one thing. I think we need to look at dreaming as being a whole brain phenomenon. The entire brain is involved in dreaming in one way or another. And the totality of brain function goes beyond the hemispheric differences. Most researchers believe that the dreaming cycle begins in the old brain in a little organ by the name of the pons, P-O-N-S, and this initiates a sense of electrochemical processes that hit the amygdala, where they pick up emotions, and then this travels eventually to the frontal lobes of the brain, which take this information in these little scraps of memories and imaginations and congeal them into what passes as a dream. So there's a lot that's going on before the right and left hemisphere is actually contacted. I think that the hippocampus also has to be mentioned. The hippocampus is in the midbrain along with the amygdala, and the hippocampus is where the memories resolve. And so you think of memory and emotion as being important constituents of the dream, and these are picked up before the dream itself is created by the cerebral cortex, which involves the left and or right hemisphere.
This is a question I have. This is something I've noticed. Now, in McGilchrist's book, he always, again and again, for Western people, what he calls the right hemisphere, it communicates in image, metaphors. It speaks metaphor. The left hemisphere, he says, the language hemisphere, the mathematical hemisphere, it doesn't speak metaphor. He said it doesn't understand metaphor. Now, the interesting thing is our dreams then speak in the language of the right hemisphere. They speak metaphor. They usually don't speak. Some dreams do have language, but most dreams speak a pictorial language and it moves through. It's like the picture is a metaphor, which is metaphor is, of course, the modality the mind uses when it's approaching something it doesn't know, something new. And that's what the right brain brings forth in dreams. Dreams are always, my experience, always present something new information that the mind, the waking mind, no busy as it is, it doesn't have this information. And if it understands the dream, it gets important information.
Well, as you know, Montague Ullman made a big issue about metaphors in motion. And he used in motion to denote the fact that the metaphors are not always constant. They're not always the same.
No, they change.
They can shift. And they can represent different aspects of the dreamer's life. I tell people that the metaphor is a part of the dream that presents a lot of information in a very, very short amount of time. Same thing with symbols. A symbol is an image that has a deeper meaning. A metaphor is an activity that has deeper meaning. And the problem with the dream dictionaries, which are very popular, is that they come up with a single meaning for a metaphor, a single meaning for a symbol, and it's not that easy. The symbols and metaphors mean different things to different people, and they can mean different things to the single person, depending on what part of the dreamer's life they're working with.
Another thing, the dreams, Montague Ullman, the premise of Montague Ullman's whole approach to dreams, he told us that the dreamer awake is often is more interested in what is expedient than what is true, whereas the dream is completely true. And McGilchrist shows us the left brain, if it doesn't know something, it'll just make it up, and then it'll insist that it's true, like a fundamentalist, like an evangelical Christian or some fundamentalist, free market fundamentalist. Whereas the right hemisphere is not like that. It presents what's true. And in my case, the dream that changed my life was like that. It presented a truth that shocked me when I found it out. And another thing McGilchrist found is that the left brain is sort of amoral, whereas the right brain is very moral. Now, that's very interesting. It's very interesting to me. And also the connection of the right brain with creativity and sacred. Dreams are clearly deeply rooted in whatever it is that is creative in us. The Google guy started that company from a dream he had. And so the chemical, the periodical chart of elements in chemistry came from a dream. And so the invention of the sewing machine came from, so much creativity arises from dreams. The structure of benzene came from a dream. The waking mind, I know with myself, my waking mind, I'm at this and that, I go along, then I get tired and I lie down to take a nap and I wake up with a realization. So the moment I fall into that state, a realization can arise because all that thinking is out of the way. What do you think of all these ideas?
Oh, good heavens, you come up with such excellent ideas. I like them all. You've been really attentive to the research and what's been going on. As you know, the International Association for the Study of Dreams had to meet virtually this year because we could not meet in person. Next year, we hope to have a person-to-person meeting in Tucson, Arizona. This will be the first time we've met person to person for a couple of years. And that's where I get a lot of my information, like the information that you've just come up with, in terms of new thinking about dreams and new ideas about dreams. For example, Kelly Bulkley, who you know, and you've read some of his books and articles, has a fairly new idea in terms of the function of dreams being play. That dreams like to play around with different experiences they've had and different metaphors that they've used. And I think that this notion of dreams as play is a very helpful way to look at the dream, because it indicates that while we're sleeping, it's not all serious and not all sobering. It can be done in a spirit of play as well. And of course, we have at our meetings a number of visitors from other cultures, and they often come up with radically different interpretations of dreams depending on their culture and their understanding. Now, the bottom line to me is something like this. Dreams are such an important part of the night that it really doesn't matter so much what you dream as the fact that you dream something. The fact that you have to dream something keeps the brain tuned, it keeps the brain active. It has all sorts of excellent functions, and this applies also to the dreams that take place in non-rapid eye movement sleep. I think that there are a number of functions of dreams that have been pretty well nailed down. Dreams review events during the day and call out the less important events and discard them. And they file away the important events because they might be needed in the future. Also, dreams download emotion. Yes, we get a lot of emotional release from the emotions in the dream. Also, dreams anticipate problems and often come up with solutions to problems. Also, dreams can be rehearsal. They can be a rehearsal for threats and dangers, and rehearse them in the dream, and then we're better to work with them in everyday life. And then we have a whole other category of functions that is usually not too well discussed, and that is dreams that help us develop spiritually and emotionally. And so dreams have a developmental function also in terms of helping us to make improvements on our way of being, albeit in sleep.
I wonder if you could say something about what you feel the importance of dreams to individual development is, and the value of home and dream groups to individuals and to society at large. That was a topic I wrote down that I wanted to ask you about. Do you have anything you'd like to say about that in conclusion? Because
Oh, yes, I could say a great deal about that. In many indigenous cultures, dreams served a very important function for society at large. In many times, there'd be a shaman who would have a dream and would dream about it on behalf of the entire community. And the dream might be giving directions for the community, directions that need to be followed if the function were to have a useful purpose. I think that dreams can be of help even in Western cultures, even though they're usually negated and ignored. If people became more attuned to their dreams and more aware of what they were being told during the course of the night, I think they would live more enriched lives because they would have insights into the unconscious determinants of their behavior. And I think that this is one of the losses when psychoanalysis moved off-site, because psychoanalysis, aside from all of its shortcomings, did enable people to get information about dreams that they could put to some sort of practical use. I think that psychodynamic therapy does much of this, although it's much shorter in duration than psychoanalysis. And also, dreams can be put to use in cognitive behavioral therapy, in humanistic therapy, transpersonal therapy. There are any number of therapeutic approaches that can build upon what dreams have to offer.
I have to close in a few minutes because we've come to a limit of our time. But I just want to say that what really fascinates me about dreams. I'm not a therapist. I never even had a course in psychology. I'm not a psychologist. But what fascinates me about dreams is their creative potential to change the way we're dealing with nature and with each other, and the way we're running our society into the ground with the addiction to fossil fuels. It's doing great damage to the ocean and the forest, the grasslands. And I feel that dreams, just for ordinary people like me, stand to make a much healthier world where we're more whole people, like Jung would say. We're more rounded out with our opposite functions and everything. That's touches me about the potential for dreams. And it makes us more, in a sense.
I think that you've just hit on something very valuable. This is where dreams can be very useful today in this era of climate change and the destruction of the natural environment, because dreams have a way of reminding us that we are not taking good care of the earth. And I think this is a way that dreams can come to the assistance of people in Western cultures, because dreams are picking up on issues like this. Dreams are picking up on issues that urge us to pay greater attention to nature. And I think that I'm glad we got to this before we closed, because I think this is a way that dreams can be used fruitfully by people who come to the Montague Ullman oriented dream seminars or any other type of work with dreams. And I think that probably the greatest challenge that we have is keeping our planet viable. And because dreams reflect our entire way of life, our entire environment, they're going to pick up on that. And they're going to warn us, you've got to do more to save the environment or you will be paying the penalty. And I personally have run into a number of dreams where this is the very, very clear remedy, the very, very clear message of the dream.
Well, I think that's an excellent place to close. Stanley, I hope we can talk again. I'll contact you on email. I would like to arrange a second interview because I think you have so much to say. But I want to thank you very much for this. And
oh, you're welcome. Always a pleasure to talk to you. You're doing such great work. Absolutely. Okay, so long now.
Okay, bye-bye.